Welcome, everyone, to the podcast today. I'm lucky to have Matt King here. Matt is the CEO of Gobundance, which is a mastermind for high net worth, very driven people who want to live epic lives. I'm proud to have been a member since February of 2020, right before COVID. I joined, and he's also the right-hand man for an entrepreneur worth over $200 million. And so we're going to dive in today to kind of his experience. And Matt is an expert at replacing yourself. And I think one thing that a lot of us all struggle with, we become the bottleneck in our own business, right? Like my business can only grow to me, and then I'm the cap. And I think, Matt, you've done a really good job first being that person for somebody else, and then now doing that to yourself as you're growing your world. So let's kind of start that in terms of you get this opportunity to kind of work with this guy who's, most successful people in the country, right? In the world, like relative when you really think about it. Talk to me just about kind of like, what was your process to try to be a sponge and to start to help him grow?
First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been an honor getting to know you through Gobundance, and I'm excited to be on with you and your community today. I think the number one thing to take away and to always remember as you're learning, as you're growing, which for me will be my whole entire life, Brian, is that God, the universe, whatever you believe in, gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. And I think so few people use those in direct proportion. But if you use those in direct proportion, it's amazing the things you can learn and understand and comprehend. And if you find the ability to ask questions, and even more importantly, good questions, and then just shut up, people will tell you everything and more that you could possibly imagine. And so for me, as I was going through that process with David, what I did probably better than most were willing to do was I sat in the room with a pen and a piece of paper, a pencil, because I'm not a pen guy, but I sat in the room with a pencil and a piece of paper, and I just feverishly took notes. And I knew when it was my opportunity to speak, and I knew when it was my opportunity to shut up. And I listened and I listened and I listened. And then after the meetings, I would call my board of directors, which could include David, by the way, and say, hey, when we were in the meeting, they talked about this thing called MOIC. What's MOIC? Oh, that's multiple of invested capital. Like, okay, well, I'm a college dropout. What the heck does that mean? Oh, here, let me explain it to you, right? Okay, well, they were also saying the IRR was sexy. Like, is that a girl? Is that someone I should know? What's going on with that, right? So like, I just started asking questions. And then the other thing, Brian, that I do a lot of is I take the information I get and I go to a safe space and try to regurgitate that information and share it with someone else. So for instance, on multiple of invested capital, we're out to dinner with friends, our kids are on the playground. And I was talking to one of my buddies about investing. I'm like, yeah. Like I'm focused on MOIC. Well, what's MOIC? I'm like, oh, that's multiple of invested capital. Oh, what's that mean? And then I'm practicing in a safe space, regurgitating what I've heard and becoming an expert. And like, I think the really true expert in the world is someone who can teach on the concepts they're actually doing. And so the way I teach on the concepts I'm doing is I practice it on people that I feel comfortable with, safe with, or I'll never see again, right? So as I was going through my communications coaching, I practiced this thing called RASA, which stands for Receive, Appreciate, Summarize, and Ask. Well, I practiced it with the TSA agent. I practiced it with the lady at the grocery store. I went to the gas station clerk. I practiced it there. Why? Because A, they're never going to know what I'm really trying to do. B, I probably will never see them again. And C, if I screw it up, it doesn't matter. It's a safe conversation. So I practice in those environments. And then when I get into a business negotiation worth $10 million, $12 million, $15 million, I can practice those same things on the people I'm negotiating with because I've already become an expert practicing it on the random stranger.
So for those who don't know, what does a chief of staff do?
So really what I tell people is a chief of staff is the air traffic controller. They're the person that has to know what's going on at the airport at all times, where are planes landing, where are planes taking off, and how do we make sure that there's no collisions on the runway or in the air. So you're really the catch-all. You have to understand what's going on in email, what's going on with the calendar. You have to be able to hire people, fire people. You have to understand what the budgets look like. You have to be able to read financials, but you can't be an expert at any one thing. Like if I become an expert at finance, I'll become the CFO. If I become an expert at HR, I'll become the HR manager. So you have to know how to do everything, but you have to not be an expert at any one thing. The only thing you have to be an expert at is holding people accountable, asking questions, and tracking things that are supposed to be done. So accountability. And really, like the chief of staff, from my perspective, is an extension of the human or the business that they're serving, right? Think about it in the president's space. The president's chief of staff is an extension of the president. They're not the president, but they're an extension of the president. They can speak on behalf of the president. They can be in meetings on behalf of the president, and they're still not the president, right? And so for me, the chief of staff is just that catch-all. It's that air traffic controller person that's there to serve the business or the entrepreneur that they're working for.
So I recently hired a chief of staff. We had talked 10 months ago. You'd given guidance on it. I guess his background, former military, 28 years. He was a Green Beret, special operations, had similar chief of staff-esque roles. And then, it's this foundation that I also hired my Midas COO from, that places former military special operations guys into high paying, like leadership roles in civilian jobs, but immediately like exit the military, like literally I'm his next job. And it's awesome. Like these guys are top notch, super good. I mean, it's very similar to the guys that nonprofit involved in Gobundance there. So anyway, I'm kind of now getting used to this too, right? Of having this person. And so what are some like tips that you would give me or coach me on how I can best set him up to succeed in being the air traffic controller?
Yeah, the more of a glass house that you can spend your life and your business in, the better. And what I mean by that is the more information and content you allow them to have access to, the easier it is for them to get up to speed. One of the reasons why I think I was able to succeed in David's organization isn't because of me, it's because of David. And David lives in truly a glass house. Like, I had access to his email. I had access to his calendar. I worked out of his house. I knew his wife. I knew his children. I knew the nanny. Like, I was almost a part of the family.
And I think if you really want net worth, right? Financials too, right?
Everything except for text messages. The only thing that I did not at that moment in time have access to was his texts. Everything else was mine. Everything else was fair game. His journal, even. He would leave his journal on his desk and say, "Hey, I left my journal here." And like, he never said, go flip through it, but he never said, don't flip through it. Right? I'm like, why did you tell me you left your journal here if you didn't want me to flip through it? So I'd flip through it. I'd be like, oh, okay. So here's what's going on in his personal life. Here's what he's thinking about. Here's what he's stressed about. Here's what he's worried about. I can take that stress and I can go to our team and say, hey, put together a cash flow analysis statement because we're feeling a little bit tight right now on cash. Or, hey, put together this because we're feeling a little bit tight here. And it wasn't because he ever told me that. It was because he told his journal that and then left his journal around for me to see, for me to look at, for me to understand. Even Brian, his goals. So like most people will say, well, I don't necessarily feel comfortable telling my team what I'm trying to make. I'm like, well, that's an interesting perspective. Why don't you? It's like, well, this year I'm going to give away more money than I'm paying my assistant or whatever their excuse is or whatever their story is. I'm like, and why are you afraid of that? Well, they might get offended. They might get hurt. They might get sad. But then you have the wrong effing person. Move on, right? Because if they see how big you're living your life, they know that by serving you, they too can live a big life as well, but they have to show up and they have to play the game. Now, they're not going to get it instantly. They've got to earn that right. They've got to earn that opportunity over time. So I think the number one thing I would coach people on, Brian, is live in a glass house. Access to your emails, access to your calendar, access to your goals, access to your journal, access to everything so that they can see and understand where you're at mentally and help you course correct in the line of business accordingly.
And how much and so I guess to back up a second, can you give us an idea in terms of like for David's company, his role, like how many companies is he involved in or that you have like of involvement in that are, not totally passive?
About 35. So he's got over 200 passive investments. And then we've got about 35 operating companies that we oversee and manage. So really what is important for the entrepreneur, you in this instance, Brian, or David in this instance, is you have to find your three things. What three things are you best at and are you most effective at? And what is your highest dollar productive activity? For David, it was vision, talent flow, and deal flow. If he was not doing any one of those three things, I was failing him and I was failing to serve him, right? So I would take calls. I would have conversations. I would talk to his wife about the calendar. I would do all of those things, not because he didn't care, but because it was important for us to make sure he was spending his time on his highest and best use. And that's allowed him ultimately to slowly step away from the businesses he's running today. He's still involved, but he doesn't need to be present because he wasn't present as we transitioned that opportunity because they weren't his highest and best priorities. It wasn't because he didn't like the person. It wasn't because he didn't care about the person. It wasn't because he wasn't grateful for how they were serving his business. It was because they were already talented in his organization. He needed to work on vision, deal flow, and talent flow. And if he's not in those three things, we're failing him still to this day. So when I'm talking to people, Brian, for you, like, what are your three things? For anybody listening to this, what are your three things? And then slowly just delegate everything else, right? Like one of the things I'm contemplating right now is delegating my cell phone. So whether I like it or not, I used to be a no notification guy. So I never had unread texts. I never had unread emails. My inbox was to zero every day. Like I loved it. I felt great. The opportunities I'm running right now, I just don't have that luxury. I don't have enough time in the day. And I catch myself like getting in these text conversations over things that I shouldn't be handling. And so right now I'm contemplating, do I get an additional phone? And during the work week, do I give my phone to my team? And do I have like a private cell phone? And I have this little private vault that things can get to me, but everybody else is going through the team. Now they won't know that, but that's what would happen. And I got this idea from David because he started doing that. And he got that idea from someone else successful because they started doing that, right? So as you're on this journey, Brian, focus on R&D. And most people will say, yeah, that's great. I'm good at researching. I'm good at developing. Like bullshit. Rip off and duplicate. Don't waste your time researching stuff. Don't waste your time just duplicate it, rip it off and make it your own, right? That's the greatest form of flattery, is stealing someone else's idea. So long as it's not trademarked or copyrighted or whatever, right? I'm not encouraging people to break the law.
And I learned that from you. And it honestly, like, even for like David's three, like they're my three now. It's like vision, people, and opportunities. So it's like, and I do that through the podcast. I'm super focused on media now that a lot of people see, which is the bigger my world gets from an audience standpoint, like the more opportunities get attracted, the higher level of people, like we can have a much stricter like bar because we just have so many more opportunities. And then having the vision of what are we going to actually do with it all, right? Like, because you have these great people and then you can have all these opportunities. But I think if you're not like it all sounds good then, right? Versus like, no, this is the direction we're going. If it doesn't get us to that point, like we're moving it out of the way.
Yeah, and look, Brian, most people spend 75 to 85% of their week. Most entrepreneurs, most people spend even more, but most entrepreneurs spend 75 to 85% of their week in the weeds, doing shit that they don't need to be doing. And so then they don't have time to focus on vision. So then all of a sudden their employee comes to them and says, hey, I'm feeling frustrated. I need more money. Well, that conversation stemmed from they don't see a vision for this business such that their vision can fit inside of it. And that entrepreneur didn't have the time to go paint that vision or build that vision or craft that vision or dream that vision because they were too busy answering emails or managing their calendar.
One of the things, and I don't know if I got this from David or whatever, but one of the things I like to talk about, the bigger that my world gets, the more opportunities get created for people to rise within my world. You are like a living example of it, right? Like you started as like an assistant in Home Depot and help them with the tree or whatever, the story you've told many times. But then now you're running like multi-million-dollar companies. Bigger his world get, like you will continue to rise within it, right? Like you that will happen in the same. Like I've created the same thing in my world, and that's how you attract and retain, I think, really high quality people.
I think that's the power of ownership of business, and then the power of entrepreneurship. You have to look at your vision like a balloon. You have to first make that balloon big enough that other balloons can fit inside of it. But then you must make sure that your balloon remains elastic enough that your balloon can expand as the visions inside or the balloons inside of your world get bigger too, right? And so, like one of the reasons most people leave their job is because they no longer see a way to achieving their goals inside the opportunity they're in now. So do you sit with your people? Do you ask them what their life looks like in 5 years? What are their goals this year? How are they going to achieve them? What does that look like? And then you can intentionally bring them along on this journey because you know where they're trying to go rather than trying to backpedal and chase your tail when they say, hey, I was offered $5,000 more, so I'm going to go take this other opportunity. It's not really about the money. Yes, the money is a part of it, but it's really they don't see a way to achieving their goals inside of your world. And so the money helps them achieve the goals elsewhere.
So David's got this vision. The entrepreneur, they've got this big vision of what they want to achieve in their business, right? And then there's this question, all right, 35 companies or whatever, which is a lot, way more than I thought, to be honest. Is it then that like, all right, we've got these different divisions, and as long as they're aligned with that vision, and then I guess it's like this question of your involvement of, are you seeing opportunities that you're trying to bring in because you see it's aligned, or it's, whatever, things come into your world and you're the first line of defense to say, hey, is this worth me bringing to him or not? Doesn't necessarily fit within an acquisition of a real estate office or just his development company or the debt company or like whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So what I would tell you is both David and I are very low C on the disc. We're not very detail oriented. So we're kind of more of like the Wild West gunslingers than like the trained sniper. So he didn't really build it all with this big grand vision in mind. Like he had a grand vision for his personal life, but he didn't have a grand vision for his business to say, this is going to feed that, and that's going to feed this, and then these divisions are going to be separated, and they're going to share an employee. It was kind of like, oh shit, we'll build another business. Oh shit, we'll build another business. Okay, cool. We'll strap this all together. And so like one of the things I'm working on right now is kind of building out that plan and that vision of how everything serves one another up and funnels up to that bigger vision. Because I was able to see that firsthand, I'm trying to be more intentional with how I build my world so that I can build it with the end in mind from the beginning. And then to your second point, yes, like absolutely. I'm always seeing opportunities and bringing to him. Like one of the things we're working on right now is building out a multifamily office. The reason we're doing that is I saw this opportunity. I saw this need. People kept coming to me for advice. We weren't charging them anything. I was like, wow, there's a really big need in this marketplace. And I went to David and said, hey, we need to do this. And his response was, I don't get it, but have fun. I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to figure it out, right? I'm going to go run with this. So I'm always trying to look at ways to like bring things in and funnel things together so that we can snap ships together in that storm and make ourselves more powerful. But I am the filter. I am the one that, ultimately sees and gets to decide on 95% of the things. At the end of the day, it's his money. And if he wants to overrule me, it's his power all day. And I will never stand in his way for that. But he trusts me. He understands like we have an investment thesis now. We have a way to make investments. We understand like we want paths to control. We're not going to be passive investors anymore. So like he understands that all of these things we're putting in place are ultimately to serve him and his family at an even higher level. And so he doesn't really fight it much. But we're always looking for opportunities. We're always looking for new things to do. And we're always trying to figure out what else can we do to make this business, be even more supercharged because of all the other businesses we already have.
Has that evolved over the years in terms of him and his involvement? And like, I know it's in the beginning, you're like crazy about it, right? It's your baby. It's how you make money. Obviously, as you evolve and you get higher, and even me, as I'm like more disconnected from like the daily weeds, I'm like less, hey, as long as we make money, as long as like whatever, we're aligned with our core values, to give my people flexibility, right? That's part of it. And it's also because like, then I become a linchpin and I don't see the whole picture because I'm not in it, right?
Right. Yeah. So it took a while to evolve. And I think one of the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs make is they listen to a podcast like this and they're like, oh, David just handed over the reins and then got out of the way. And a lot of people, I think, promote too quickly. Like, I think they give people titles, they give people money, and they give people authority very quickly and an opportunity. And they're like, oh my gosh, I found the next best thing. Like, this is amazing, right? David and I have this joke, like, has the shine worn off the penny yet, or is it still shiny? Because the shine, whether the person is the most talented person you've ever found or the least talented person you found, all of them have a shine and at some point will begin to rust in places, even your most talented people. And so you have to make sure that you don't over promote or move too quickly. So David had this concept he taught me, which is I do it, we do it, they do it. So you build the business, you're involved, then you and your partner, or you and your chief of staff, or you and your assistant are doing it, you're being involved, and then they're doing it and you're monitoring it. And the accountability once you move into they do it has to be extremely high early. And then you can slowly back off the reins as they show and earn the opportunity to run with the ball more by themselves, right? But I think a lot of people go, the only way to get big is to hire a bunch of people. I'm going to hire a bunch of people and I'm going to go to sleep. And then all of a sudden they wake up one day and they had $1 million stolen from them, or the multifamily wasn't performing, or the business failed, or they got a letter from the IRS, whatever it could be, right? And it's because they gave people too much power too quickly and the people weren't ready for it. It's not because they weren't capable, it's because they weren't ready for it. And they felt like if I go to the boss, or if I go to my visionary and say, hey, I can't do this, that would show that they were weak and couldn't handle it. So a lot of people just try to do shit and then mess stuff up. And then all of a sudden one day the whole thing blows up and they're like, why didn't you say anything? It's like, well, you were never around. You didn't want to know anyways, right? And it becomes this finger pointing game. So I think you've just got to go slow. You have to understand that it's a journey. It's not going to just be this instant automatic, wow, I'm a 7th level entrepreneur, I don't have to work. And you have to be willing to set up the right systems and processes to hold your people accountable.
Yep, 100%. And I feel that as we're growing too, of just setting expectations and then letting them ride, and then just keeping an eye and having that line of communication. I think that's the. Let's shift to Gobundance a little bit. So Gobundance, for those who know, it's a mastermind, high perform. We're 800 members now.
900, yeah.
900. It's like male and female split, whatever. That has evolved over the years. So let's talk about just the power of a mastermind, right? The power of surrounding yourself with like-minded people who like-minded, but also think differently and can help you see new light. I think that's like, there's two things there. And so, let's talk just a little bit that, and just the power of why someone would invest the money to be part of a group.
So most people like to surround themselves with people that tell them what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. And there's a big difference. Our spouses, for instance, oftentimes will tell us what we need to hear, and it doesn't feel good, and we get triggered in the moment. But it's what we needed to hear, right? Like, hey, you're a deadbeat dad, or hey, you're not doing this, or hey, this is how I feel, or hey, this is how you're showing up, right? And we get defensive and we want to attack, but that's really what we needed to hear. And so, the power of a mastermind really revolves around this concept of eagles soar with eagles, they don't soar with pigeons, right? There's only one bird that can fly at the altitude of an eagle. That's an eagle. And there's only one bird that will attack an eagle, and that's a crow. And the way a crow will attack an eagle is it will latch onto its back and try to bring it down to an altitude where it can fly, right? Life is like that, Brian. Like our people that we surround ourselves with, it's not intentional. Most of the time, it's not malicious, but it's just human nature. Like, I don't want to lose this friend. I don't want to lose this son. I don't want to lose this business partner. I don't want to lose this acquaintance. So they're growing too fast. Like, I got to tell them, don't do that. That's scary. That's a bad idea. No, you shouldn't do that. No, you should take that risk. No, don't celebrate that 100 grand, right? And they're that crow that are trying to pull us down. Now, the way that an eagle defends itself is it flies to an altitude where a crow can no longer breathe. The crow falls off and the eagle can continue to soar with eagle. So the power of a mastermind is getting to that altitude where you're soaring with people doing things you want to do that are going to tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear, that are going to push you, that are going to challenge you, that are going to celebrate your wins and celebrate your failures even more so, because the only reason we fail in life is because we tried. So the power of a mastermind is really understanding that we are the 5 people we spend the most time with. And if we really want to evolve and grow as humans, we have to spend time with 5 people that aren't afraid to kick us in the teeth when we need to be kicked in the teeth.
How do you vet a mastermind, right? There's a lot of masterminds, I think, get a bad name. Like there's the gurus on Instagram that'll 10, 20 grand, 50 grand, we'll teach you how to get rich. We'll teach you this. Like, I think there's like this kind of, there's like a negative kind of vibe around, masterminds because of like everything you said, right? That's the dream. But then it's like, how do you know who you're actually getting in a room with and like it's actually real stuff and not scammers or people just trying to sell you a bunch of shit, right? Like versus like legitimately wanting to improve your life and business and everything.
Yeah. So what I would tell you is if the guru or the mastermind is promising you this silver bullet for success, it's probably bullshit. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of really successful people. Not one of them had a magic pill or a magic bullet that got them to the finish line instantly. The other thing I would tell you is look at the people that are in the community and ask yourself, do I want their lives? Not their Instagram life, not their Facebook life, but do I want their life? They're on their 3rd marriage. Their kids don't talk to them. That plane was leased and got foreclosed on. Whatever their life looks like. Now they're not going to put that on social media, but really dig in and understand what their life looks like behind closed doors. Because if you join that mastermind, your life, just based off of pure osmosis and the power of who you surround yourself with, your life will become that, right? If you want to have a powerful relationship, it probably doesn't make sense to hang out with the single friend who goes to the strip club every night, right? If you want to be a great father, it might not make sense to the guy who doesn't have children. Now, that doesn't mean you don't talk to them. That doesn't mean you don't go play golf with them, but it just means you don't spend a ton of time and energy with them because you don't want to become them. And the same is true with the mastermind. Like, I almost think about vetting a mastermind the same way I would vet an employee. Check references. Who's in the group? How has it transformed their life? What's the good? What's the bad? Tell me what they would change. Tell me what they would do differently. And tell me how they grew through that mastermind. Don't tell me, oh yeah, I got in the mastermind, I sold a bunch of products and now I'm rich. Like, tell me, I got in the mastermind, I recognized that I was failing here, here, and here, and I was held accountable to change my life and make it better. And it became better because of the conversations that we had in those closed doors.
So so Gobundance has evolved. When I joined, I think there was 300 members, maybe ish, something that range, 250, 300. Now it's 900. So it's significantly bigger. Obviously, it's evolved. I think one of the biggest challenges with any mastermind, and I run a small one for franchisees. We're about 40 members currently, like only franchisees. It's this question of like, as you grow, right? It becomes harder because people get disconnected. There are ways that you work to create those connections geographically, interest, different levels. But like, if you could boil it all down, like, and maybe some of it's advice for me and like, this small group I'm growing, what do you think people get the most value out of? Whether it's in-person meetings, whether it's pods, whether it's like guest stuff, like there's all these elements you can add. And at the end of the day, it's like, there's probably a 20-80 rule here.
People get the most value out of all of it, but get the most value out of the part that significantly allows them to be seen, heard, and loved. At our true core self, you, me, every single human, what do we want? What do our children want? They want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be loved. And so if you're looking at scaling an organization and you're worried, what I hear you saying is about maintaining the vulnerability and the intimacy of the group, the way to do that is to make sure you are much more intentional about seeing, hearing, and loving your members, understanding where they're at, making sure you're checking in, having policies to see how things are going, and being able to track their engagement score. Like, how are they doing? Are they involved? The other thing I'd say, Brian, is we read this book as a team called Fans First. It's by the guy who founded the Savannah Bananas, that baseball team that's gone viral. what what he talks about is reducing friction. So everything in their experience is about it reducing friction. They're selling out baseball stadiums, yes, because the game is fun, but they're selling out baseball stadiums because the walk from the parking lot to the stadium is a parade. They're selling out baseball stadiums because once you buy your ticket, it includes the food and the drinks. They're selling out stadiums because it's an experience where they feel seen, heard, and loved with their friends, their family, by the Savannah Bananas, etc. Right? Like in the book, he talks about this guy who was attending. It was a minor league baseball team that essentially was failing. It's still a minor league baseball team, but the guy bought it. And there was this one fan that like went to every single game, like forever. And he was this like old man. They went above and beyond as he got older to make sure he had a seat behind home plate. As he got really old, they made sure to get him out to the stadium, to let him yell play ball, to have the fans giving a standing ovation. All of these things to see him, to hear him, and to love him. And when an organization does that for a human, all the other humans say, well, they're going to do that for me too eventually. I've just got to show up, right? And that allows you to maintain that vulnerability and that intimacy, regardless of how many members you have, because you're focused on really seeing your people, hearing your people, and loving your people, and making sure you're truly invested in their lives.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's your bigger vision for Gobundance? Like, where do you see it in 5 years? I mean, numbers, just impact.
Love it. Yeah, so like, I truly believe that if we can change a man, we can change a family, we can change a business, we can change a community. If we change men, families, businesses, and communities, we truly can change the world. And so, it's grandiose. It's a bit probably naive. Somebody will probably say it's narcissistic, whatever you want to say, right? But like, I truly believe that with the power of Gobundance, which is focusing on the whole life and doing it with vulnerability, intimacy, and accountability, and doing that at scale, I truly believe we can make a dent in the world. I think we can make an impact on the world as an organization, as members, as peers, as one another. And that's where I see Gobundance going. Like, I truly think that Gobundance will make an impact. It already has, but I think it'll make a big, meaningful impact on the world because of the power of bringing like-minded people together, making them better, having them take that back home, and then the ripple effect occurring, right? Throwing the rock in the water and seeing the waves of how many people they can impact.
So how do you balance your time between CEO of this huge multi-million-dollar company, right? And then we've got, the right-hand man, which is obviously he's one of the founding members of it. It's how you kind of part of it. It's all within his world, right? But how do you balance that? And then obviously, family and everything that's important to you, and you got kids and all that.
Yeah, look, man, I'm not perfect at it. What I will say is I don't try to separate or compartmentalize personal and business. I let them all just be one giant pot of ingredients that are slowly mixing and stewing at any given moment. I learned early in my career a couple lessons from some great guys in Gobundance. One of them is very successful at building multifamily. He's an older gentleman, and he's got just awesome grown children that are helping in the business. And I asked him, I said, hey, how did you parent to get them there? He said, the number one thing I did was every time I was on a phone call, I put it on speakerphone and they listened to everything I said. They listened to everything the other party said, whether it was a lawsuit, whether it was buying a building, whether it was celebrating the success of a building. I brought them along on the journey. And so the way I balance everything is I don't try to balance anything. I just let it all go, man. I let it all flow. And then I have people that hold me accountable to get in check if I'm out of check. My wife will kick me in the teeth if I'm out of line. Like, she'll be like, hey, you haven't been present. Put your phone down. Great. Put my phone down, right? I have goals to help keep some accountability and some balance inside of what I'm trying to do so I can be present as a husband. I can be present as a father. I bring my family along on business trips. I bring them to the events. Like the funniest story I have is the first event I ever brought them to was in Jackson Hole last year at a Champions event. And we went for the sound check. And there was guys setting up the stage. And my daughter was 4 at the time. And she pulls me aside and says, Dad, can I whisper something to you? I'm like, yeah, what's up, Rye? She's like, I thought you set up the stage. Why are they setting up the stage? It's like, oh, no. I don't set up the stage. I speak on the stage, right? And then later in that event, I brought her on the stage. And now she was up on the stage. And now she's asking, when can I go back on stage? Can I sing Frozen? Can I do all these things, right? So the way I balance, Brian, is I try not to balance. I have very good people around me. I'm incredibly lucky to have awesome people inside of David's world, awesome people inside of Gobundance, awesome people that work directly for me. They help carry a lot of the water at many different points in the journey. So I'm very fortunate there. But I operate with grace. I operate with understanding. I know I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to be perfect. And I know that, so long as I focus on my vision and where I'm going in the next 5 years, everything will work itself out and I can be present in all things I need to be.
I do something similar with my daughter. I'm taking call. I drive her to school every day and we're taking calls and stuff. And And so sometimes she'll ask me what I'm doing, and I'll tell them about someone I'm trying to hire, or hey, I got to go meet with this guy because we got to fire him because it's just like, it's not working out, or I'll complain about taxes or like whatever to her. Then she'll like ask me later on. She's like, oh, so how'd it go firing that guy? Or like,
Yeah.
like
I mean, like
ask me
a
about
great
taxes.
example,
But
Brian.
it's funny, but we just she's like into it too, and she's she's almost 8 here, but
Because she cares about you. She wants to be a part of what you're doing, right? She wants to be seen, loved, and heard. And so she wants to be a part of your journey. This morning, I went and voted. Now, I'm not like a big political guy. I don't really like it. I actually wasn't going to vote. But I took my daughter to school this morning, and I was like, hey, I'm going to take her for breakfast, and then we're going to go vote. So I took my daughter to vote. So, like, there's my 5-year-old in the poll box with me, clicking the screen, putting the ballot into the machine and feeding the machine. And the whole time she's like, what are we voting for? I'm like, the president of the country. Well, what does that mean? What does that do? I'm like, who do you want to vote for? She's like, rainbow unicorns. I'm like, they would make a great president. That would be powerful. How would it, so like talking about these things as we're going through life, I think is the most valuable way to bring people along on the journey. And it's how I find the ability to balance is because I'm just doing life in the flow of it, and business and family are all life.
Cool. I appreciate you coming on. This has been great. I think,
thank you.
I think you it shows kind of the power too of just building your team, and it's like the who, not how. And you became the who for David, and now, you find your own who's as you start to build it up. And I think it's a good vision for people to have. It's just keep making that balloon bigger, keep allowing other people to grow within it, and like you can live a great life. So
that's right, man. That's right. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, cool. And if anyone wants to learn more about Gobundance, gobundance.com. You can check it out, and we'll see you at an event.
Thanks, Brian.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.